Today we're talking about your tertiary personality strength. Without a clear understanding of your personality, it's easy to mistake your tertiary function for inconsistency or distraction, when in truth, it's a natural part of your development, encouraging you to explore new ideas, express creativity, and find balance. I've got something on my mind share, and that is the show, The Audacity.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I like it. I know I do. I know I like it. I don't know that I love it. There's some unevenness in there, blah, 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 blah. But with this last episode we watched of The Audacity, I really get how they're ham-fistedly warning the viewer. Well, we watched a behind-the-scenes thing where everybody in the show basically said, we're ham-fistedly warning you, the viewer, about the evils of some of the places we're seeing tech going in. From that perspective, it's just a brilliant exploration of what's happening in the minds of the big brains, predominantly in tech and predominantly in Silicon Valley, and some really interesting explorations about the reality of people in touch with that, and just the reality of the greed and lifestyle associated with that, and a lesson and look to all of us who are living in this world, who are on social media, who are living life, like how you can just become a version of yourself because of tech, because of keeping up with the Joneses, a version of yourself that becomes unrecognizable or very unlikable, and how tough it is to stay focused on who you are and what's best for you. And I think that's probably why this resonated for me and why I wanted to make it a mind share, because we're talking about one's personality stack, and watching the show is a reminder to me of what can happen if you get so outside of yourself that you're doing all this stuff and you're guided by some bizarre external locus of control that is not grounded in self and can get kind of ugly.
Yeah. And I feel like this show is really brilliant, and I don't think it got the accolades it deserves or even the attention it deserves, because I think they build it as a comedy. And when you think about a comedy about Silicon Valley, you think of the show Silicon Valley from HBO, which was hilarious and also concerning. But this is more like Shakespearean comedy, like drama, like not funny, haha, like funny, oh God. But the acting is brilliant, and it is very thought-provoking, and it is still kind of funny. It's just very dark humor. So we're getting to a fun part of personality where we're talking about our third cognitive function in what we call the stack.
I love that you said fun, because it's so you and I, like,
because we're such personality dweebs.
Yeah, like getting into the real minutia stuff and the stuff that's kind of ew, because tertiary and inferior are not comfort zones for people. But
no, but tertiary is in fact kind of a fun part of your personality. So just to recap, we talked about your dominant personality type, which is pretty much been with you your entire life, kind of your out of the womb personality trait, strength. And we talked about your auxiliary personality strength, and that, as we said, develops later in life, maybe late adolescence or early 20s. Right. So those are your most mature, and that secondary, the auxiliary position, is surprisingly less mature, if you will, than your dominant. But then we come to your tertiary, and this shows up for most people fairly late in life. We're talking midlife. Yeah. So if we're using the word mature, which is, kind of loaded, so don't get hung up on it, this is a fairly immature personality trait for most people.
For sure. Yeah.
And
we always say it never advances beyond a teenage mindset.
This is like a perpetual teenager.
Yeah, in your life.
In your stack.
Yeah.
But that's why I think it's kind of fun, because it has a lot of the potentially negative connotations that we would ascribe to being a teenager, but it also has a lot of the creativity and easy expression, and it hasn't learned to be too heavy yet.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I'm maybe getting a little woo-woo with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you...
But it is kind of a fun place to go. What do you have to say about the tertiary?
Yeah, I think I always kind of chuckle with this, because I think this is the epitome position of why you want to know your personality, because you've got this thing that if you don't know your personality, if you've never decided to figure out you're never going to know. You're never going to know your tertiary thing. Of course not. You're never going to know your tertiary. But if you do know it, it can be really tough to harness. But there's also some very interesting things that come with that knowledge. Knowing that something is not your strongest, it's not your second strongest, it's your third strongest. And the reason I laugh at this is you and I both have thinking in our tertiary, and at one point in my life I remember thinking I want to be a lawyer, one of those things like that came up that was like a great thinking kind of position. And I you had talked about this regarding feeling in the last episode. I kind of fashioned myself as like, okay, so to do the kind of jobs I think I want to do, I have to be a thinker.
Yeah.
So honestly, I always felt kind of disadvantaged. Like I was getting great grades and, all that stuff, all the accolades and awards, but I felt like I couldn't think like a normal person.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, I figure out my personality a little bit later in life, and it's because thinking is not
your dominant strength.
A dominant strength, or even an auxiliary strength. And as we close out this segment, I know you feel the same way. And you can kind of even hear me laughing because we're both thinking in tertiary, we know if we're having kind of a thinky moment within ourselves or a thinky moment with each other.
Yeah.
That it's kind of a little chuckly moment, because it's like, okay, we're engaging in something where we're not really clear.
Well, I go back to the word fun because now that I know my personality type, and to be clear, both Kent and I are internal thinkers in our tertiary, but it almost to me feels like big thinking is a hobby. Do you know what I mean? So I like to have big thoughts, and I like to dwell on things, and I like to ponder the universe and try to figure life out. And I, like you, Kent, used to think that, I was supposed to be, I don't know, some kind of big thinker because I had big thoughts. But I didn't have the rigor or the stamina to really do that in a big way. Do you know what I mean? You need, like you thinking you're going to be a lawyer or whatever, you need that to be in your dominant position if you're going to have the stamina and rigor to see that through beyond sort of a fun hobby.
In everything we've done in our personal lives and as sought after business and career development consultants, we've learned one consistent thing. Most people just don't know themselves. NoVacationRequired.com is where we talk about how you too can build a life that you don't need a break from, and how it all starts with knowing yourself. There you'll find all of our podcast episodes, information on services, and the scoop on us. And to really raise the bar, we model this as a couple to show that a relationship doesn't have to be a compromise or a counterproductive union. When two people are each doing their own work, the heightened connection becomes a shortcut to building a no vacation required life. Okay, some tertiary personality trait stats and facts. I think, Kanan, you already said, typically matures later in life, often during midlife or full adulthood. So yeah, even for those of us who are into personality and know this stuff, like at best, you've got teenager mentality that you're harnessing. One thing that's really kind of geeky but important to point out here is many professional practitioners believe that one's dominant personality trait is their preferred extroverted or introverted pairing. Meaning, if you're introverted or you're labeled as introverted, your dominant personality trait is going to be introverted, and then every other personality trait is going to be the opposite. It's going to be extroverted, because your dominant is so strong. That's all the oxygen that your introversion needs. So they think if you're introverted, your dominant is introverted, and everything else, the other three, are extroverted. If you're extroverted, your dominant is extroverted, and your other three are all introverted. We used to subscribe to that school of thought, but now I think we're probably more in the other school of thought, which believes that your dominant is your preferred introversion or extroversion, and then they bounce back and forth. So you have a I-E pattern, which is introverted dominant, extroverted auxiliary, introverted tertiary, and extroverted sensing, or the opposite, which would be EI. So what's interesting about tertiary, and the way you and I choose to believe this on a professional capacity, is that it matches your preferred extroversion or introversion. So I want to point out that the reason we believe this through our decades, God, I hate saying that, decades of experiences, your tertiary can oftentimes kind of meld with your dominant, because we believe that for the most part they share either introversion or extroversion. And Kanan, I love what you say about being in stress. As we talked about when we talked about your dominant personality trait in week 1, a lot of people will just in stress be maniacally their dominant personality trait.
Right.
But when you get to what we see as what we call moderate or heavy, mild, or moderate stress, you can do something a little trickier, often unbeknownst to you. And you can lean into a melding of your dominant and your tertiary. And Kanan, again, I like some of the things you have to say about this, so please share.
Well, we talked about how your secondary, your auxiliary, is a really important sort of check and balance to your dominant personality strength. What happens, like you said, unbeknownst to most people, when they get into a moderate level of stress, is they shut out their auxiliary. And they create this little loop, this little closed loop between their dominant and their tertiary. And that loop might be completely introverted, or it might be completely extroverted. Based on the explanation you just gave. And it's super unhealthy, because you have essentially cut out the checks and balance in your life. What do you have to say? Kent's raising his hand.
Yes, this is another reason why I have the chuckles, because knowing personality, and this is something we get into a lot with our clients and talk about with our YouFinder product, you can recognize when this is happening. And I can so recognize when this is happening when I'm early in some kind of process or something a little high stakes, and I can feel myself thinking.
Yeah.
So I feel my quiet internal intuition melding with a clumsy tertiary internal thinking, and it makes a bad feeling worse. Because remember what I just told you when I thought I was going to be something thinky in life and how that hurt. Imagine going to thinky and it hurts. Imagine going there when you're under stress. It makes me so sad for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that same process because we share a type. So I have the same process when I'm in moderate stress. But for me, it feels like things are coming to me through my internal intuition. And instead of ever extroverting those thoughts, I'm skipping the whole external part. And I'm going to this self-confirming or self-doubting part of my brain that's either saying, Kanan, you're so right. You're so right. Just think about how right you are.
Yes.
Or it's saying, in its very immature way, like, okay, boomer, you were so wrong here. And no matter what happens, it's either confirming or disconfirming my intuition, but my thoughts are never making it out to the real world to have somebody check me.
You're just in this warm, private place of severe discomfort, but also self-certainty. And just to confirm, you are not a boomer, literally. But,
no. I'm just saying this is the teenager part of me who would think, somebody in their late 40s is a boomer. But I want to say that in that process, and this is why it's so interesting in moderate stress, that process, be it completely internal or completely external, can feel so effective. It can feel like you're doing the work. And in fact, it's completely ineffective and actually quite harmful. Thanks for listening. We'd be honored if you'd subscribe, like, and share. It means the world to us.
Okay, so what does this look like in balance? In balance, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling like you know what your tertiary personality position is. So for me, I try to stay out of that mode in early and even mid stages. And then only when I'm feeling good about something in whatever, is going on. Could be a new idea, could be anything, really anything, a task, a thought. If I'm at my best and if I'm using my tertiary in balance, I'm only then thinking about or applying thinking to what I'm doing. Now, I want to say there's some interesting cases where you need to be putting thinking first in how you approach something, because life dictates certain situations where thinking is important to be able to do on the fly, and we get into a lot of that with our clients. But in matters of everyday practical life, I know I'm not doing so great if my thinking mind opens up too early.
Yeah.
And I know I'm doing pretty great and acting in balance if this tertiary thing, this teenager, only comes in as a supporting character. And then if it's only as a supporting character, it is incredible.
Yeah.
The exponential help it can place on whatever you're doing that's grounded in your top two personality strengths.
And I said fun earlier. I'm going to wrap back to that. I think tertiary can be really fun because it can also break your schema, break through your comfort zone, and offer up some fresh ways of taking in the world or perceiving the world or approaching something that can feel really creative, like I said, fresh. And so you should be prepared when you know you're tertiary to pay attention to that every once in a while and touch base with your tertiary and say, what's coming up there? Because that less mature part of me is also less burdened by time and the realities of the world and the realities of my personality. And it might have something interesting to say that I can then apply my dominant strength and my auxiliary strength to make sure it makes sense. But it can be really fun too. It's mailbag time, Kent, and I have a question I'm going to read here, and I'm going to have you answer it, okay?
Sounds good.
Why do I have zero trouble making decisions in one part of my life, but completely freeze up in another? Go for it.
Yeah, not uncommon, but that's a tough question to answer because it could be so many things. But I'm going to give a pretty likely answer, and one that relates so directly to these issues of personality that we're talking about, particularly in this series, the stack. If something requires you to, just thinking about what we're talking about, tertiary function and thinking, if something requires you to get really thinky really quickly, and that's not high in your stack, that's going to be a very uncomfortable thing. Or even more likely, extroversion versus introversion. So if you're an introvert and you feel like you're literally on a stage having to make a decision, it's going to make you freeze up. But if you're an introvert and you feel comfortable making the decision and you feel like you have time to do your little process, that's going to make you feel much more comfortable. So I would say the answer is knowing yourself. And the whole reason why you'd even want to know your personality, why we work with people and why we've practiced this on ourselves, is because then you can know how to toggle. Like, you can see something coming. I go, wait, okay, I'm going to be out of my ideal personality aligned situation. I need to be ready to use my less preferred functions, maybe on the fly or in an uncomfortable situation. That's the beauty of knowing your personality, because then you learn, well, where might decision making be easier in parts of my life, and where's it going to be more difficult in parts of my life.